My name's Kemp Savage, and I'm looking at practical exercise testing for rowing training. The tests and the techs were suggested by Christopher J. Gore, who's worked with the Australian national team. He's a very cutting edge researcher in exercise physiology, and he's known a lot for his work in living high, training low, and its effect on VO2 max. And during that, he's come up with some of these tests because he's been working with rowers. Gore's testing battery is a 5-day testing battery. Day 1 being 90 minutes of aerobic activity. Day 2 being a rest day. Day 3 is when they start to actually get into the tests. The first test they do is a 100-meter test, which is a anaerobic power test. Close to a peak power, not quite there. It has a little bit to do with the aerobic endurance as well. They then take 20 minutes rest, do a 500-meter test, which is an anaerobic endurance test. Takes about a minute and a half, a little bit longer for most women, but still a very short but intense test. Day 3 is the 6,000-meter test. This is the fall standard distance testing, as well as rowing. Day 4 is a 15-kilometer steady state. This is just a clearance recovery day. Day 4 in the afternoon, again, 10 kilometers steady state. It's relatively hard pacing for steady state, but still a clearance day. And then day 5, finally, the 2,000-meter test, which is the go-to test for the spring. 2K is our racing distance in the spring. It's the Olympic distance. It's the distance of distances, if you will. The justification for why they do these tests. Again, he's looking at the aerobic power with the 100-meter, some aerobic endurance with the 500-meter. VO2 max equates well to your 2K score. Anaerobic threshold equates well to the 6K score. Your anaerobic threshold is roughly about the average of your 6K. They do not test aerobic endurance here. It's left off of this list of tests. If they would have tested at the 90-minute, that would be aerobic. Again, you don't quite have to go quite to 90. 60 works, but the 6K is too short to really be an aerobic test. Too short and too intense. Average test results, again, the only test I really have a big question about, well, there are two, is doing a 100-meter test, because since most of the time you have to start from a dead stop when you're erging in order for your computer to pick up, you have to spend some time getting the fan up to speed before you're at your able to pull max wattage. So if you were able to do it on the fly, the average times would be significantly lower, somewhere probably in the 15-second range, and the average wattage would be higher. But those first couple strokes it takes to get the fan spinning costs the rower. We do something a little different to measure peak power that you'll see in a little bit. 500-meter test, I don't really see a point in it. Your anaerobic power is, or anaerobic endurance is kind of a, it's not a lost area, but it's pretty close in this situation. There's just not a whole lot of good training you're going to get out of it, knowing that number. 2,000 meter, you obviously need to know this. This is the race distance in the spring. 6,000 meter, again, race distance in the spring. And the scores here, a woman under a 7-minute 2K is on most national teams in the world. Australia, they're probably easily on their national team. In the U.S., to get a look at the national team, you have to record a score of 7 minutes or better. So these are obviously very good athletes. The rowing test EMU do. We do some different things because I think they're physiologically a better choice and more accurate tests. The first is on our day 1, we do a peak power test. We do this during our warm-up. Our testing protocol is 3 days long. So during the warm-up for our 2K test, we do a pyramid warm-up, 5 minutes, nice and relaxed, steady state, 4 minutes going up a little bit more intensity, more intensity, more intensity, more intensity, till we get to the peak power. And since most of the time when you're doing a warm-up, you want to get up and above your 2K range, this fits in nicely. You want to pull a couple what we call power 10s, 10 really hard strokes to kind of get your muscular systems really working, get a lot of aerobic oxygen going to the area by depleting it a little bit during the warm-up. We also come back down a pyramid coming out, so you can replenish those and have a couple minutes rest before the 2,000 meter test starts, so you can get a full replenishment of that creatine phosphate system. So when we're doing the test, we do 3 trials with 3 minutes in between each trial. Each trial is 10 strokes long, and we're looking for the highest observed single stroke wattage. So not the average over the 10, which would be roughly a 100-meter test, but the highest observed wattage on a single stroke. So if you pull a 575, the next stroke you pull a 580, and then you pull a 575 again, the only number we want is the 580. We're looking for the true max, kind of like the jump test, a real one impulse wattage. The 2,000 meter test, again, it's a set sprint distance for the spring. It's the test of tests, so we get it done on the first day. Day 2, we do a 60-minute test. This is our measurement of aerobic base. Again, with rowing training, you're looking for almost a pyramid of how the speed builds, so you need a very big base. It's really hard to build a really fast athlete with their aerobic base and everything else more like an obelisk. You need a big, strong aerobic base. We place it on day 2 because it being at 70 to 75% of your VO2 max. That's a literature number I'll use later. It can help as a lactate recovery, so you can have the lactate clearance from the day before, and it breaks up the testing so you don't pound lactate, and then have a lactate recovery day on the last day. We break it up with a longer test in the middle to do the muscular clearance on day 2. Day 3 is a 6,000 meter test. This is the fall season race distance. It's, again, one of the scores you have to submit to make it to one of the national teams. So it's one of the standardized scores for rowing all over the world. 6,000 meters is a standard score. Everyone pulls them. Everyone turns them in. It's how you get recruited. It's how you get on to national teams. Blah, blah, blah. We put the 6,000 meter test on the last day because when we typically start doing these tests, we start in the fall. And the 6,000 meter number is more important to us in the fall. And once we set the order, with that being the last test, we leave it throughout the semester. We don't switch the 2K and 6K days just because it's a different time. All right, results for us. You can see, again, our athletes obviously aren't national team athletes yet. The wattage for a lot of this is lower than what you saw on the other. We do have one girl who has a peak power score that dwarfs everyone on the other from the Australian study by a lot. She's up to 800, but her aerobic base is very small, so she suffers a little bit when we get into the 2,000 meter testing. All right, I showed you that last one, and it's a bunch of numbers and wattage, but this is what really matters when it comes to how we use this, is we use what we call ceiling data. And you can see here that for athlete number 1, the peak power ceiling is red. It's over top of the 40 to 45%. It's at 49.7. For athlete 2, the VO2 max ceiling is 86 over the 85. And for the last athlete, they're in the green for all of them. They're right in the middle of the formula. So how we use this is we go, okay, if you're running into a ceiling, and that would be when you're above the percentage, it means that training underneath that level isn't going to give you the gains that training above that level can. So athlete number 1 would be put into a peak power group. Athlete number 2 will be put into a VO2 max group. And athlete number 3 is unique in that they're underneath all of them, so they have space to move up on the VO2 max, on the 6K, on the anaerobic threshold, and on the aerobic. This is kind of depends on the time of year, how you prescribe from this person. If it's in the fall, we're going to work on anaerobic threshold and get that up. If it's in the summer, when we're on our off season, we're going to work on aerobic ceiling. If it's in the spring, when we're looking at 2K speed, we're going to work on the VO2 max. This is kind of an athlete that requires the judgment call depending on what you're trying to work on. Because again, if I'm looking at this athlete and I go, okay, well, they're 5% under the top end of the peak power ceiling, well, we can take that 4% or that 5% right now, and so we'll work on 2K. If they're in the VO2 max ceiling, I'm looking at them going, okay, they're, again, about 5% or 4%. We can go, okay, well, let's work on that. So it gives you a lot of discretion as the coach. Again, we're using by the test. We're basically identifying the weakness of the athlete, and then training to bring that up to the level of the rest of their scores. So then we can train and get more out of training at another level. Based on the percentage of the max effort, we found this off of literature. You can find, your aerobic steady state pace is 70 to 75% of your VO2 max score. Your VO2 max can reach about 40 to 45% of your peak power. And we use the wall analogy of when we're training and our athletes ask us about this, like, well, I'm over this. Isn't that good? Yes, it's good. But right now, if we train that system, so going back one, if for athlete number 1, if we decide to train VO2 because it's 2K season and that's what we're going to do, their gain is going to be very small percentage-wise because they're already over that ceiling. Whereas if we train peak power, we can open that space up. So when we go back to the VO2 max training in the next period, they'll get much bigger, much greater gains. It's like pounding your fist against the wall. Eventually you'll get through it, yeah, and you'll get faster. But why not move the wall 10 feet away first and then try and push through it? All right, here we're going to take a quick look at the training plan and how this works out. All right, so here's our baseline training plan for our week 3. So 3 days of the week, 4 days of the week, everyone's doing the same thing. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then we do a hard workout on Saturday that's kind of a mental workout. So everyone's getting their base steady state aerobic work 3 days a week. And then what we have on Tuesday, Thursday, we have what we call swing days. Swing days, when we come down here and we look at it, are based on what you need to work out. So we tell every athlete, okay, you're in peak power group. So on swing day 1, that peak power athlete would do 10 by 100 meters with a minute 50 rest. So they're doing really hard, really fast 100 meters, and then they're taking nice long minute 50 rest. That's about 10 seconds or 20 seconds of work time to a minute 50 rest. Again, they do that 4 times, 5 minutes rest. So they're working really hard very quickly, and then they get a lot of rest time. And then we prescribe, they have numbers based on, so day 1 is peak power 1. That has, based on their 2K score, what their peak power number should be. And they're different. So peak power 1 is different than peak power 2. AAR1 is aerobic 1. So when they're at the off time, the minute 50 rest, they have to be at aerobic 1. And same thing for the VO2 max. And again, they have the same levels and anaerobic groups. So we're using this the best way to put it is to specify training and individualize training without having to individualize a plan for every person. We're kind of individualizing for a group of people, set them in their section, this section, to get bigger gains out. Team results. I'll share some of this. This is what we've gotten from our training. During the first training period, which was January 9th to February 27th of this year, the average 2,000 meter time went from 8:39.1 to 8:05.5. Now this includes all our new athletes, everybody, and that's a 34.5 second improvement. It's a big jump. Some of that can be related to winter not erging over the winter. There's some efficiency drop by not doing the exercise, but that is compensated on training period 2. When you're looking at the average 2,000 meter time going from 8:05.5 to 7:57.76. That is a more likely change. But again, 8.7 seconds is a big jump when you're talking about athletes that really are highly trained, and now we got to take the next step. 8.7 seconds is a big jump if you know aerobic training in speed. So, over the total time period, it was 81 days of training on our indoor season. An overall gain of 43.2 seconds improvement per athlete. So, we've gained almost a minute total as a team. 3/4 of a minute, I guess. The average 2K time dropped to 7:57.6. In total, that's a 9% improvement. Again, with the drop of efficiency, the efficiency came back very quickly. You can't quite contain all that 9% to the training plan, but it's still a good place to start. So we really like this testing. Gore's testing was close, but I kind of had some problems with how he did the peak power, and the 500 meter test I felt was superfluous to any kind of training. So these are our testing scores, and thank you for your time.